It wasn't a sound that shattered the quiet of my study. It was a silence, the specific, heavy silence that falls after a blade has been thrust in. Just before the blood and the pain register, I had been sitting at my late husband Arthur's mahogany desk, intent on signing a check. Another one. For my son, Samuel. The church's boiler had unexpectedly failed, he'd said, his voice a balm of practiced piety over the phone. Anything for the community, Mother. I paused, pen hovering. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My daughter, Isabella, had arrived an hour earlier, ostensibly to check on me. She was in the kitchen with Samuel, who must have arrived while I was dozing. They thought I was still napping in the sunroom. I heard the clink of ice in a glass, then Isabella's laugh, a sound I had once treasured, now brittle and sharp as shattered porcelain. She's just lingering, Isabella hissed. The venom in it made me freeze. She's 79, Samuel. How much longer can she possibly hold on? I've been managing her, her house, her life for 10 years. I'm exhausted. Managing me? I thought. You visit for tea once a week. Samuel's deeper tones rumbled, not in protest, but in weary agreement. I know, Izzy, I know, but the man from Atlantic City, he's not as patient as my congregation. He wants the marker paid. All of it. Now. Atlantic City? She whispered, sharp. Sam, you promised. You promised you'd stopped. I needed a miracle, he snapped. The Lord provides in mysterious ways. The Lord doesn't provide at a craps table. You used the money from her savings account, didn't you? The one I gave you access to for church repairs? My blood went cold. Not just cold, it turned to ice. My hand, the one with the pen, was shaking so violently I had to set it down. It doesn't matter, Samuel said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. The house is the key, the estate. It's worth millions, but it's all in her name. We can't touch it while she's here. There was a long pause. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. Each tick was a hammer blow against my chest. Then, Isabella spoke. Her voice was no longer high-strung. It was low, deliberate, calculating. The woman is built like a brick shithouse, Sam. She'll outlive us all, unless she gets sick. Sick. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Isabella said, the ice clinking sound returning, that a woman her age with a shocking diagnosis, well, people get their affairs in order. They make charitable donations. They listen to their loving, devoted children. Samuel was quiet. Then a low, appreciative chuckle. A charitable donation. To the church, of course. To save my ministry. And to me, Isabella added, for my years of service. She'll never agree. She will if she thinks she's dying. She'll do anything we say. We just need the right doctor. Someone convincing. I didn't move. I couldn't. The woman they were describing, this frail, gullible, inconvenient thing. It wasn't me, it couldn't be. I was Agatha Thorne, matriarch, widow of Arthur Thorne, a man who built a steel empire with his bare hands. I was a pillar of the community, a donor, a volunteer. I was a mother. I was the woman who had sold my own mother's pearls to fund Samuel's seminary education. I was the woman who had co-signed the mortgage on Isabella's sprawling Tudor home, the one her perfect husband could never have afforded. I had hosted every christening, every birthday, every Thanksgiving. My hands, now spotted with age but still strong, had baked thousands of cookies for grandchildren who grew up to text "thax" on holidays and ask for money on their birthdays. And I was the woman who was, at this very moment, being auctioned off by the two people I had built my entire world around. The silence in the study was absolute, but in my head, a war had begun. The shock was a physical blow, a nausea that rose in my throat. Then came the grief, so profound and sharp it felt like Arthur had died all over again. I was grieving the children I thought I had. The son I believed was a man of God. The daughter I believed was my friend. They were gone. In their place sat two ghouls, two vultures, waiting for me to die. The grief lasted for perhaps 3 full minutes. Then something else rose up. It was cold, and it was hard, and it was heavy. It was the steel that Arthur had forged his empire from. It was the iron in my own blood. It was rage. A cold, clear, and perfectly precise rage. Isabella was right about one thing. A woman my age facing a shocking diagnosis would get her affairs in order. Oh, yes. I certainly would. They wanted a show? I would give them a performance worthy of Broadway. They wanted me to be frail? I would be porcelain. They wanted me to be dying? I picked up the checkbook, I tore out the check I had been writing, and then, with a steady hand, I began to write a new one. Not to Samuel, to Mr. Julian Price, Price and Associates Private Investigations. The next 2 weeks were a blur of hollow performance. I was the loving, slightly dotty mother. I called Samuel to tell him I had misplaced the checkbook, but would find it soon. I accepted Isabella's offer to organize my medications and watched, smiling as she counted the pills, her eyes lingering on my jewelry box. Meanwhile, Julian Price, a man with the weary eyes of a fallen priest and the tenacity of a bulldog, was digging. He was expensive. But Arthur had left me with more than just a house. He had left me with "fuck you" money. It was a term he'd used with a wink, and I had always scolded him for it. I finally understood what it meant. The first report landed on my doorstep in a plain manila envelope. I waited until the house was still, the lights of the city twinkling below my window. I poured a small glass of brandy, my first in a decade. I opened it. The pictures were grainy, time-stamped from a casino security camera in Atlantic City. There was Samuel, my son the pastor, his face pale and slick with sweat, throwing dice at a craps table. He was surrounded by men who looked like broken-toothed gargoyles. The date was just 3 days after he'd collected the church's Easter fund, which I had personally donated to. The next file was an audio recording I put on my headphones. It was Isabella's voice, honeyed and smooth, at a high-end pawn shop downtown. "It's very old," she was saying. "French antique. My great-grandmother's. It's just not my style. You understand." I didn't need to see the picture. I knew the piece. Arthur had given it to me on our 25th anniversary. It was my mother's locket, the one Isabella had always admired, the one she'd cried over when I told her it would be hers one day. Not my style. I listened as she haggled over the price, finally accepting a sum that was a fraction of its worth. The money, Price noted, was deposited into an account under her maiden name, an account her husband knew nothing about. But the final item was the most damning. Price had bugged Samuel's office. He'd caught a phone call. It wasn't to a casino. It was to a Dr. Alistair Finch. "Yes, advanced pancreatic," Samuel was saying. "The prognosis needs to be grim. 6 months. Tops. She'll believe you. You're the head of oncology. In return, the Thorne Family Foundation will make a very generous donation to your new research wing." There was a pause. The doctor must have refused. "Look, doctor." Samuel's voice turned hard, the piety gone. "Everyone has a price. Name it." Dr. Finch, it seemed, hung up. I closed the folder. I finished the brandy. "So, They had already tried. They were clumsy, amateurish. They were driven by desperation and greed, a fatal combination. I, on the other hand, was driven by something far more powerful. I called Mr. Price. "Julian," I said, "I need you to find me a doctor. Not a real one, an actor. A very, very good one. And I need you to find me the best audiovisual team in the state. And I need you to start liquidating, quietly." 2 days later, I collapsed while pruning my roses. Isabella found me, her shriek of concern loud enough to wake the dead. I allowed myself to be rushed to the hospital, a private clinic, one of my choosing. This is where Dr. Elias Vance was waiting. He was perfect. Silver hair, a somber tie, a voice that resonated with false empathy. He was a disgraced Shakespearean actor Price had found in a bottle of whiskey, and he was hungry for a final, great role. He ran tests. He looked at charts with a grave expression. He sent my children out of the room for the final consultation. When they were called back in, I was sitting up in bed, looking small. Dr. Vance stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the light. "Mrs. Thorne," he began, I wish I had better news." I watched them. I watched my children perform. Isabella's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with what a stranger would call shock. I called it anticipation. Samuel bowed his head, his hand gripping the bed rail. "Tell us, doctor. We can take it." "Oh, you can you?" I thought. "It's advanced aggressive," Dr. Vance said, shaking his head. "We can start treatment, of course, but it would only be for comfort. In my professional opinion, 6 months, perhaps less." The room fell silent. Isabella crumpled. She literally fell into a chair, her sobs racking her body. They were magnificent, theatrical. She was good. Samuel, my son the pastor, put his hand on my shoulder. His hand was trembling. Was it with grief, or with the vibrating, ecstatic thrill of the craps table? "Mother," he whispered, his voice thick. "Mother, we will be here, every step. We will not leave your side." I looked at him. I looked at my son, the thief. I looked at my daughter, the liar. I summoned a tear, just one. It rolled down my cheek. 6 months? I whispered, my voice a perfect, trembling reed. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Vance said, bowing his head. My children rushed to me, enveloping me in a hug. Their bodies were warm. I felt Isabella's hand patting my back, her sharp nails lightly scratching. I felt Samuel's embrace, strong and possessive. It felt like being hugged by snakes. "We'll take care of everything, Mother," Isabella sobbed into my shoulder. "You won't have to worry about a thing." "Yes," Samuel murmured, his voice thick with false tears. "We will handle the estate, the house, all of it, so you can rest." I closed my eyes. "You are such good children," I whispered. "My blessings, my only blessings." The trap was set. The bait was taken. The 6 months that followed were the longest, clearest, and most painful of my life. I was a ghost in my own home, watching my own funeral unfold in slow motion. My children were perfect. Isabella moved in. To look after me, she told everyone. She reorganized the kitchen. She went through my closets, sorting items into piles. Keep, donate, and I saw a very quiet Isabella. My jewelry box was moved from my vanity to her nightstand for safekeeping. She made me broth. She fluffed my pillows. And she talked. "Mother, we really must simplify your assets. It's all such a burden for you. In your condition, Samuel and I were thinking, a simple trust. It would make everything so much easier. We can manage it all." I would just nod, looking frail. Whatever you think is best, dear. You're so clever. Her smile was bright and brittle. Yes, Mother, I am. The grandchildren visited. Oh, how they visited. They hadn't been to Sunday dinner in years, but now they were here every weekend, bringing me drawings and cheap flowers. They were awkward, unused to showing affection, their eyes darting around the room, cataloging the antiques. My eldest grandson, Isabella's boy, Thomas, sat with me. "Grandma," he said, all false sincerity, "Mom said you're sick. I'm going to miss you. And, well, I know it's a bad time, but my student loans, I just don't know how I'll manage when you're, you know." I patted his hand. "We'll see what we can do, Thomas. We will see." Samuel, meanwhile, was my spiritual guide. He came daily to read the Bible. He sat by my bed, his voice a rich baritone, reading psalms of comfort while his eyes scanned the signature on my checks. "Mother, the church is praying for you. The entire congregation." "That's lovely, Samuel." "And Mother, I've been thinking about your legacy, your house, this beautiful home. It has been a beacon. What if, what if it could continue to be a beacon, a center for faith and community, the Samuel Thorne Outreach Center?" "What a wonderful idea, son. A donation." His eyes lit up, a predatory gleam he couldn't hide. "Yes, a donation. We could announce it. A final grand gesture from you to celebrate your life." And there it was, the hook, the line, and the sinker. "A celebration?" I murmured. "Yes." Isabella joined in, gliding into the room. "A party, Mother. A farewell dinner, not a sad one, a grand one. Everyone who ever loved you, all the family, all your friends. We can tell them about your final generous gift. They can honor you." They looked at each other, their faces alight with shared, ecstatic greed. They thought they had come up with the idea. They had no idea I had been planting the seeds for weeks, mentioning to my bridge partners how I wished I could see everyone one last time. I knew my children. They couldn't resist a stage. They wanted to pressure me, to get me in a room full of my peers, my family, the pillars of their community, and have me sign the papers in a flood of public emotion. It would be irreversible. It would be their greatest performance. "A dinner," I whispered, closing my eyes. "That sounds beautiful." "Yes, let's have a farewell dinner." The final month was a flurry of activity. My children were busy. They hired caterers. They sent out thick, cream-colored invitations. A celebration of the life and legacy of Agatha Thorne. They consulted with lawyers to draw up the donation papers, which they dutifully read to me. The documents would transfer the house and all remaining assets, irrevocably, to the Thorne Family Foundation, of which Samuel was president, and Isabella was treasurer. I was busy too. Mr. Price's AV team was disguised as a high-end cleaning crew. They spent a day shampooing the carpets and polishing the fixtures in the grand ballroom. They were, in fact, installing high-definition, recessed panel screens and a broadcast-quality sound system, all linked to a simple remote control I kept in the pocket of my dressing gown. My sickness progressed. I moved to a wheelchair, not because I needed it, but because the sight of my frailty fueled their arrogance. They stopped whispering in the kitchen. They spoke openly in front of me, discussing the sale of my car, the auctioning of the art, as if I were already a piece of furniture. "She can't hear," Isabella would say, waving a hand in front of my face. "The medication, you know, it makes her so drowsy." I would just drool, slightly. The day before the dinner, my true lawyers, not the ones Samuel and Isabella had provided, came to the house. While Isabella was at the spa, getting strength for the big night, I signed the real papers. My house, my stocks, my art, my cars. Every last cent Arthur had left me, and every cent I had carefully grown, it was all gone, transferred irrevocably to the St. Jude's shelter for abused and neglected elders. My lawyer, a sharp woman with no patience for fools, looked at me. "Agatha, you are a stone-cold legend. Are you absolutely certain?" I looked out the window at the roses I had planted. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. My children are planning a party to celebrate my legacy. I simply cannot disappoint them. The night of the dinner arrived. The ballroom was magnificent. My children had spared no expense, my expense, to create a tableau of loving grief. There were lilies everywhere, their scent thick and cloying, like a funeral home. A string quartet played somber classical music, and there was everyone, my entire family, my nephews, my cousins, the partners from Arthur's old firm, the ladies from the charity board, the new mayor, and of course the senior members of Samuel's congregation, the jury. Isabella and Samuel wheeled me in. I was dressed in pale lavender silk. I looked, I must admit, like a very expensive, very fragile doll. They parked me at the head of the main table, a cashmere blanket over my lap, Isabella, in stunning black velvet, dabbed at her eyes. Samuel, in his finest suit, his pastor's collar stark white, looked grave and noble. They mingled. They accepted condolences. I heard the whispers. So brave, both of them. Her rock, Samuel, is a saint. And Isabella, she has sacrificed everything to care for her. I just smiled, a weak, trembling smile, and nodded at everyone. After the lobster bisque, Samuel tapped a glass for silence. The room went quiet. "Friends, family," he began, his voice cracking with emotion. "We are gathered tonight not to mourn, but to celebrate. To celebrate my mother, Agatha Thorne, a woman of infinite grace, boundless charity, and," he went on, he painted a portrait of a sainted woman I didn't recognize. He spoke of her devotion, her sacrifices. It was a beautiful eulogy. Then Isabella rose. She spoke of the quiet moments, the late nights, how hard it had been to watch her beautiful, strong mother fade. But even in her final days, Isabella said, her voice catching, her only thought was for others. Her only concern was her legacy. How could she continue to give even when she is gone? This was it. The lights dimmed, as planned. A single spotlight hit Samuel, who was now standing by a podium. "Tonight," Samuel announced, "Mother will be signing her final act of charity, a gift that will echo for generations. She has instructed us to turn this house, her beloved home, and her entire estate into the new Thorne Family Community Center to be administered by my church." A gasp of admiration went through the crowd. People were crying. "We have the papers here," Isabella said, gliding to my side. She produced a leather-bound folder and a heavy gold pen. "Mother, it's time to sign." She placed the pen in my hand. My hand, of course, was trembling. "Oh, dear," I whispered. "My hands are so weak." "It's all right, Mother," Samuel said, his voice a soothing coo. "Just make your mark. We will witness it." He and Isabella leaned in close. I could smell the faint, sour scent of greed on them. I looked down at the paper. I looked at the pen. Then I looked up at Samuel. "No," I said. My voice was not a whisper. It was clear. It was strong. It filled the silence. Samuel froze. What? What did you say, Mother? I said, no. I dropped the pen. It clattered loudly on the table. With a strength that shocked everyone, I gripped the arms of my wheelchair and I stood up. The collective gasp in the room was a wind. Isabella's face went white. Samuel's smile twitched, then vanished. Mother? Isabella stammered. You shouldn't be. You're weak. Oh, I'm anything but weak, Isabella, I said. I smoothed down my lavender silk dress. And I'm not dying, but we'll get to that. I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out the small black remote. Samuel, you spoke of my legacy, Isabella. You spoke of my final days. You both seem so concerned with my assets. I felt it was only fair to show everyone just how concerned you've been. I aimed the remote at the wall. You see, I too have been preparing for my final act. You wanted a celebration of my life? Then let's not forget the details. I pressed the button. The wall panels I had admired for years slid away, revealing a 50-inch plasma screen. It flickered to life. The image was grainy. It was a casino. Exhibit A, I announced. My son, the pastor. The room watched in stunned silence as Samuel Thorne, man of God, threw a stack of $100 chips onto a craps table. We heard his voice, thin and reedy. Come on, baby. Big money, no whammies. Samuel! A woman from his congregation shrieked. Samuel looked like he had been shot. That's not. It's a fake. It's deep fake. Is it? I said, turning to the crowd. The markers he owes to the tune of $200,000, which he took from the church's Easter fund, are very, very real. Before he could speak, I pressed the button again. The screen went black, and an audio file began to play. It was Isabella's voice. French antique, my great-grandmother's. It's just not my style. You understand. I watched Isabella's husband, a man who worshipped the ground she walked on, turn to look at her. His face was a mask of confusion. That, I said, my voice cold, was my daughter, pawning the locket my husband gave me. The one she cried over when I told her it would be hers. She got $10,000 for it. A pittance. She's not just a liar, she's a bad negotiator. Isabella was hyperventilating. You bitch. I'm just getting started, I said. I pressed the button again. This time it was a bank document, a transfer. From a joint account I shared with Isabella for household expenses, to an offshore account, and another, tens of thousands of dollars. And this, I said, is my daughter, the perfect housewife, who has been systematically bleeding me dry for 5 years, not for her family, but for this. The final image appeared. It was a grainy photo taken by Mr. Price of Isabella kissing a man who was decidedly not her husband. Her husband stood up. He didn't say a word. He just walked out of the ballroom. The room was in chaos. People were shouting. My grandchildren, their faces pale, were staring at their parents with horror. Samuel finally found his voice. He stormed toward me. How dare you! After all we've done! You're sick! You're senile! The doctor said 6 months. Ah, yes, the doctor, I said. I smiled. Let's talk about the doctor. You see, I know you tried to bribe Dr. Alistair Finch. He was, unfortunately for you, an honest man, and he reported your attempt to the medical board. You should be hearing from them soon. Samuel's blood drained from his face. So, I had to hire my own, I continued. Dr. Vance, a marvelous actor, don't you think? He gave the performance of a lifetime. He cost a fortune, but, as you've pointed out, I have a considerable estate. I looked at my two children. They were no longer ghouls. They were just small, pathetic, broken. You wanted my estate, I said, my voice ringing through the room. You wanted it so badly, you were willing to stage my death. You wanted a grand public donation, and you shall have it. I held up a single piece of paper. This is my actual final will and testament, signed yesterday. As of 24 hours ago, the Thorne estate, this house, the stocks, the art, every last penny, no longer belongs to me. It has been transferred in full to the St. Jude's Shelter for Abused and Neglected Elders, a place for people whose children have forgotten them. I tore the donation papers that Samuel had been holding in half. You, I said, pointing to Samuel, are defrocked. You, I said to Isabella, are divorced. And both of you are disinherited. You, your children, and your children's children. The Thorne legacy, the one Arthur and I built, ends tonight. With me. I looked around the stunned room. Thank you all for coming to my party. You've given me the greatest gift of all, the truth. The bar is open. Please have some champagne. It's already paid for. I turned, walked past my speechless, shattered children, and left the ballroom. I didn't need the wheelchair. I did not see them again. The fallout was nuclear. Samuel was excommunicated by his church. The news of his gambling and attempted bribery hit the papers. He was last seen working as a used car salesman in another state. Isabella's life imploded. Her husband filed for divorce, using the evidence from my party in court. He got the house, the car, and full custody of the children. Her social circle vanished overnight. She who had been managing my life couldn't even manage her own. I lived. Oh, how I lived. I sold the house. Well, the shelter sold the house. And I moved into a beautiful, bright apartment overlooking the park. I took a small stipend from the donation, just as Arthur had intended. I started volunteering at the St. Jude's Shelter. I saw real suffering. I saw women my age and younger who had been left with nothing. I used my time and the last of my fuck you money to help them to fund their legal battles, to buy them warm clothes, to sit and listen to their stories. My life had not been a waste. My devotion had not been for nothing. I had spent 79 years learning to be a mother. I had raised 2 monsters. Yes, that was my failure. But in doing so, I had forged myself into something strong enough to survive them. The steel Arthur had built his empire on wasn't just in the ground. It was in me. I had given my children 6 months. 6 months to play out their darkest fantasies, to expose the rot that had been festering for decades. And in return, they had given me the one thing I never knew I needed: my freedom. The doctor gave me 6 months. My children thought those months were for them, they were for me.